Hi, welcome to e-flux. Thanks for joining us. It is an honor for me to introduce tonight the amazing Oxana Timofeeva. Hi. Oxana is a senior lecturer on contemporary philosophy at the European University in St. Petersburg and a senior research fellow at the Institute of Philosophy at the Russian Academy of Science. She is a member of the artistic collective Что делать, or What is to be done, and a deputy editor of the journal Stasis, and the author of the books History of Animals and Essay on Negativity, Eminence and Freedom, published by Maastricht in 2009, and Introduction to the Erotic Philosophy of Georges Bataille, published in Russian in Moscow, also in 2009. The event tonight is part of the new e-flux lecture series, which is a series of events dedicated to discovering the protocols of 21st century truth, assuming that they still exist. So this Friday we will have Suad Amri and Thomas Keenan and Jorge Otero Pilas, Alessandro Petti and Sandy Hilal. And during March, we will have Regine Sahakian, Adam Kleinman, Jean Moreno, Maria Lind, Franco Bifo Berardi, Sven Lutik and Tony Wood, Ute Hall and Liam Young. Tonight, Oxana is the first lecture of this series, Materialist Dialectics of Oil. The lecture starts from mapping a variety of philosophical materialisms to raise the question of possibilities for a philosophy of nature today. Welcome, Oxana. Thank you.
Does this work? Mm-hmm. Thank you, Amal, for this beautiful presentation. Hello, and I'm super happy to see everyone. Can you hear me properly? Does it work? And I'm really happy to share some preliminary results of my new work here. These are just like really brief notes. I am about to start working on this subject, and so. Enjoy or, I don't know, or suffer what one would prefer to do. So this talk has an epigraph from a Russian writer, Viktor Pelevin. People think that they sell oil, but in fact they are becoming oil. How is it possible, if possible at all, to be a materialist today? The question could be addressed to those who proclaim themselves the only true materialists and build their argument on the critique of the wrongness of materialism of the others. Is there a better name for this epic battle for the flag of materialism than philosophy of nature? Such naming, however, seems to be compromised in today's theory, as any synthesis of knowledge about the living and the non-living world under the head of philosophy of nature threatens to awaken the specter of classical Western metaphysics that is already labeled as idealism, as an idealism in all philosophy school books. A little bit of a philosophical introduction at the first part of this lecture. And yet, the question of nature or material reality is a stumbling block of ontology, philosophy of science, psychoanalysis, political economy, etc., etc. The main difference is that today's philosophers of nature do not present their subject matter as that is nature, as a mirror of spirit, a universe of a God creature, or something of this kind, but seek to discover nature as such, to think about the very nature of nature that is naturally independent of thought if not opposite to it. About 100 years ago, Alfred North Whitehead, a famous English philosopher and mathematician, formulated the problem as follows. Here I quote, "Thus, in a sense, nature is independent of thought. By this statement, no metaphysical pronouncement is intended. What I mean is that we can think about nature without thinking about thought. I shall say that then we are thinking homogeneously about nature. Of course, it is possible to think nature in conjunction with the thought about the fact that nature is thought about. In such a case, I shall say that we are thinking heterogeneously about nature." End of quote. Nature is not thought, says Whitehead, and it is difficult not to agree with this statement. Thinking homogeneously about nature is, according to Whitehead, inherent to natural science. It seems that now philosophy joins this thread and paves various ways of thinking nature that is not thought as it naturally is. These ways are called materialisms, new materialisms, and also realisms. Real, some realities over there. However, with over or under precision, we can still qualify them as new philosophies of nature. The concept of nature revolves around the concept of the human in various directions, including the transhuman, the non-human, the anti-human, the post-human, or the inhuman. The nature of nature as such, here I can probably use this beautiful board, can be thought as agential, the nature of nature. The nature of nature agential. And here we can think about, for example, Karen Barat's ontology, or no, agential realism, Karen Barat. Then as, let's say, an ancestral or real that was already there before us, ancestral or real. Like in, for example, Quentin Meillassoux. Or as also objectal objects. When everything subject, including turns into objects, like, for example, Graham Harman. Or as hyperobjectal, like hyperobjects. This is just like a mapping of contemporary materialism, so that how many matters do we have? Hyperobjects, global warming, for example, that is now at the end of the world, rise beyond all our measurements. This is, for example, Timothy Morton's case, hyperobjects. But also the nature of nature can be described in terms of the older oppositions of subject and substance, or subjects and substance, for example. Subject, substance. or as a subject, oh, sorry, substance, or subject and object. Again, objective, but also subjective. Or subject and thing, the thing. Thing is important thing. Such as, for example, these are more dialectical ways of seeing it in contradictions or in binaries. This can be materialist dialectics and transcendental materialism, critical Marxism, or also contemporary versions of philosophical theoretical versions of psychoanalysis. Also, the nature of nature can be approached as a forms of life, and this will be called vitalism, forms of life. This is called vitalism. Is it clear what I do here? And then as bodies. Then everything are bodies. And for this we have, for example, corporeal, transcorporeal, and incorporeal materialisms, or what Alain Badiou calls democratic materialisms, when he says there are only bodies and languages. You probably remember, if not, never mind, doesn't really matter. But do believe me, he calls this democratic materialism, materialisms a little bit ironically, or as also media and technology. Media and technology. It can be dialectically or non-dialectically opposed to technology, nature, I mean. Nature, technology, a contradiction which is either dialectical or not. If it's not dialectical, it's called a binary opposition, like the one that presents a problem. In the dialectical way, this problem is something good, but in a binary opposition, it's not really. It can be also represented and symbolized as a constant lack, like a lack of resources, and it is called extractive economy. Like extractive economy is based on the idea of a lack, constant lack of resources, or a lack of desire, for example. Lack of desire in psychoanalysis, it's called libidinal economy. Extractive economy and libidinal economy are parallel things. They go hand by hand together. Or it can be also presented as an irreducible excess, not a lack, but excess, as a realm of need and necessity, or of hyper chaos and contingency, as something to be defended and preserved, like in eco-philosophy or deep ecology, all these very like good soul things, or as a threat, as a complex of unknown, blind, and potentially destructive forces, like in the so-called dark materialism. Here I would say a couple of words about this author, Eugen Tucker. In his book, In the Dust of This Planet, he presents a dark materialist philosophy of nature through the lenses of horror. The word world has, according to Tucker, 3 different meanings. The first is the world for us, or simply the world. The second is the world in itself, or the earth. And the third is the world without us, or the planet. The world is anthropocentric. The earth is natural, and the horrifying planet is supernatural or fantastic. About the earth or nature, that in a significant part is grounded by scientific inquiry, Tucker says that it is a paradoxical concept. At the moment we think it and attempt to act on it, it ceases to be the world in itself and becomes the world for us. The author is more interested in the last supernatural world, from the non-understanding of which he is trying to remove all the anthropomorphic projections. He claims that first, thought is not human, then nature is not natural, that life does not belong to living beings, but is rather alien to them, and that perhaps the future of philosophy lies in the mysticism of an inhuman, uncanny, dark matter. Such mysticism of nowadays is not theological, but climatological, and devolves, I quote, upon the radical disjunction and indifference of the self and the world. Climatological, like global warming again, climate change becomes a kind of a mystical force that is at the same time and not a part of it, the human soul which reunites with God in its mystical experience, but the other way around. This is like something totally separate, alienation between man and the planet. Without sharing, woman and the planet, sorry. Without sharing the mystical spirit of Tucker's philosophy of nature, I would say that any horror makes sense for me only when it turns into a comedy, which is a stronger weapon that demystifies not only everything that exists, but also everything that does not exist, without reducing it all to a mere data of positivist inventory. I generally find this Tucker's division useful and productive. However, I would like to suggest that the world for us, the world in itself, and the world without us, so Earth, planet, and the world, simply the world, are not three separate entities, like here the one, here the other. I rather imagine them as three concentric circles. Concentric circles. 1, 2, 3. Here the world. Sorry, here the Earth. Here the planet. So is it clear somehow? Don't try to copy it, please, because this, maybe when you see it, then afterwards it doesn't make much sense, but just like for us to think and to have it before our eyes. The smallest inside is the world, the bigger the Earth, and the biggest the planet. Although, after all, these three circles might be of the same size and even occupy the same place. Their difference is not geometrical but topological. The first circle is like the home where we live. In this home, everything is familiar. We are surrounded by things that belong to us. We open the doors of this circle and go out the doors. There is a second circle there, where animals and plants dwell without thinking and being thought, nature. This is nature as such, or the world in itself, Or to borrow the name Quentin Miyasu gives to things in themselves outside any subjective relation, the great outdoors. The great outdoors. We grab something there, some food, some wood to make fire, some water, etc., and go back inside, go back home. But we know that there are yet another other doors, the doors of nature, that lead towards an even greater outdoors, where even the wildest of beasts do not dare to go, let alone humans. It is populated by gods, demons, dark forces, hyper-objects, and other entities. For some unknown reason, entities that, for some unknown reason, we cannot or do not want to explain rationally, even if we created them ourselves. The cosmic utopia, like Russian, for example, cosmism, interesting phenomena of the beginning of the last century, wanted to conquer not only nature, but that greater outdoors, the planet, the cosmos. It wanted to make it ours, this totally alien world, to make it ours, to appropriate it, contrary to the mysticism of nowadays that wants to keep it secret. In this sense, Russian cosmism presents an interesting alternative to the dark materialism. Revolution is not possible in one separate country, but the worldwide revolution is not enough too, as it only involves humanity. Bolsheviks, for example, right after the October Revolution, dreamed to revolutionize not just society, but nature itself. For nature was considered a realm of unfreedom, inequality, injustice, need, exploitation, and death. Turning rivers, blasting mountains, making animals speak. The idea was to transform the earth by means of technology in order to make it, as Andrei Platonov, a great Russian writer, says, more kind to us. But even this does not seem satisfactory, and as revolution tends to expand further and become planetary or cosmic, to awaken the dead, for example. This was the idea of Nikolai Fedorov, as you probably know, or not. Doesn't this desire to conquer the great outdoors tell us that the triple circle of the world, the earth, and the planet is still structured like a human habitat with its composite inner and outer spaces connected by doors that lead in and out? In ancient Greece, the outer part of this structure was called cosmos, and the inner, the oikos. The latter has several meanings: a house, a household, a family, but also family's property, including slaves. Today, these meanings are kept in paronymous words: economy and ecology. I will write it down. Economy and ecology. This couple is important for this talk. Oh, sorry. Both economy and ecology are dealing with nature, either as a living world environment, Umwelt, as Germans would say, or as a source and resource. They are conjugate. Beyond ecology, there is always economy, and vice versa. This is our earthy home. Here we keep slaves and exchange oil for money. But this is not the whole story, as beyond the doors of nature, the great outdoors, stance and creates anxiety. How is it possible, the world without us? My argument would be that this uncanny space or cosmos does not stand out or around the canny space of the oikos that we share with other natural creatures, but paradoxically emerges at the very heart of it. Without is within. What appears to us as absolutely alien and monstrous is to be found there where we would never think of searching for it. As Alenka Zupancic puts it very precisely, I quote, "The great outside, the great outdoors, outside, is the fantasy that covers up the real that is already right here," end of quote. The fact that it is fantasy does not mean that it can be neglected. As psychoanalysis teaches us, fantasy is no less, but maybe even more important than what we call reality. The phantasmatic world without us is not only attached to the world for us, but presents its internal truth. It is uncanny as it is unhuman and unnatural, where the prefix "un" does not merely negate, but produces a kind of displacement that dialectically turns canny, natural, human, etc., into their opposites, but still keeps the former, so to say, in that negative form. That is, like, turns canny into uncanny, and there is a, but still keeps the canny within, and vice versa, something like this. Is it clear, right? No. Okay. The etymologies of the words heimlich, canny, and unheimlich, uncanny, both deriving from das Heim, the home, the domestic hearth. It was analyzed by Freud, who underlined the ambivalence of heimlich, that on the one hand means what is familiar, I quote Freud, means what is familiar and agreeable, and on the other, what is concealed and kept out of sight, end of quote. Freud referred to Schelling's definition of unheimlich as, I quote, everything that ought to have remained secret and hidden, but has come to light, end of quote. According to Freud, the feeling of uncanniness, this special kind of fear, relates to something repressed that recurs, which recurs, and thus it is nothing new or alien, but something which is familiar and old, established in the mind, and which has become alienated from it only through the process of repression. Unconscious is not a mysterious substantial reality beyond our psychic life somewhere, but a structural formation of the process of repression which, as Lacan explains, coincides with the return of the repressed. Similarly to that, the inhuman and the unnaturally planetary outside of the world can be regarded as at the same time its very innermost that returns from the depth of the oblivion in a scary shape that we do not recognize. The world constantly turns inside out, and we are the hole through which it does so. We are the whole. By the way, I do not mean exclusively humans, but a much bigger collective of beings of all kinds that precedes concrete species. As one of my favorite philosophers, sometimes you are being asked, who is your favorite philosopher? Georges Bataille, I love that guy. So he writes in his very short essay, Materialism, of 1929, I quote, "Materialism will be seen as a senile idealism to the extent that is not immediately based on psychological or social facts." Well, or social facts instead of an artificially isolated physical phenomena. Thus, it is from Freud, among others, rather than from long-dead physicists whose ideas today have no meaning, that a representation of matter must be taken, end of quote. In this sense, Alberto Toscano is right when he says that Miyasu's concept of the great outdoors, or ancestral real, indifferent to humans and animals, is ultimately idealist in form. It is not random that Simon Critchley evokes Bataille's spirit in his critique of Miyasu. He recalls a conversation between Bataille, a historical conversation between Bataille and Ayer, a British proponent of logical positivism, which took place in a Parisian bar somewhere in 1951, and, I quote, lasted until 3 in the morning. The thesis under discussion was very simple. Did the sun exist before the appearance of humans? Ayer saw no reason to doubt that it did, whereas Bataille thought the whole proposition meaningless. For a philosopher committed to scientific realism, like Ayer, it makes evident sense to utter ancestral statements such as the sun existed prior to the appearance of humans. Whereas for a correlationist, like Georges Bataille, more versed in Hegel and phenomenology, psychical objects must be perceived by an observer in order to be said to exist. End of quote from Critchley. To be precise, oh my God. To be precise, Bataille's sun does not really need an observer. Observer is maybe not the right word here. One cannot, as Bataille constantly repeats, observe the sun, at least directly, because it burns the eyes. The sun is that cosmic object that makes me blind, insane, dizzy. Psychological aspect of matter, which Bataille tries to take into account in his own conception of base materialism, should not be underestimated. Matter is principally ambivalent and heterogeneous, as it is unconscious and cannot be reduced to anything within an epistemic framework. One second. Later, in his book, The Accursed Share, Bataille expands his critique of political economy on the planetary scale and articulates the need, I quote, to recognize in the economy, in the production and use of wealth, a particular aspect of terrestrial activity regarded as a cosmic phenomena, end of quote. This planetary activity is called general economy and is opposed to a restricted one that only registers the activity of human beings on Earth. Restricted economy is the movement of labor and accumulation of goods, of capital, whereas the general planetary economy consists in expenditure and non-productive consumption. The more we try to accumulate inside, the more destruction comes from the outside. A volcano explodes and we cannot do anything about that. An ultimately destructive cosmic activity is, of course, totally indifferent to humans, but we are involved in it, as one is involved in a crime. As you know, Georges Bataille's set of metaphors, to be involved, one can be involved in a crime. If we regard this theory as an economic refraction of Bataille's early base materialist insights, which I think are theoretically legitimate, then we have to admit that the general cosmic activity is material and thus corresponds to the unconscious that itself in Bataille is rather post-human. To put it in more psychoanalytic terms, there is a libidinal dimension of planetary ecology and economy where a universal death drive underlines all other drives. This is Bataillean theory in Lacanian terms, one would say. Bataillean theory of critique of political economy. In the world for us, where things, the world for us, this one, the world of restricted economy, you got it. Yeah? Where things operate according to the domestic laws of restricted economy, the unconscious becomes capitalist unconscious. Here I just quote the title of the book of Samo Tomšič, Capitalist Unconscious. The existence under capitalist regime is bound to a general equivalent or a value form that can be attached to any piece of living and non-living matter. The world as we know it consists of what? Of commodities. And among commodities, there is one for which all other commodities can be exchanged. Money, right? Money is both abstract and real. It is real abstraction that even if it does not really exist, produces effects. The existence or non-existence of money is a famous topic of, it could be like a virtual discussion between Kant, Hegel, and even Marx about $100, not dollars, but thalers. It's just a separate line, but it concerns the argument about the existence of God. Well, these two topics are related. So, money. It is a real abstraction that even if it does not really exist, produces effects in reality. However, this does not give us an entire picture of the structure of the world for us. The fact is that money is not an ultimate commodity. It's not an autonomous being. Behind money, there are three main commodities upon which it grows. The first is matter, the second is labor, and the third is time. All three are interesting. So three ultimate behind money. I will write them down. No, not with this marker, but okay, here. Commodities. Matter. What did I say? The second one. Labor. Mm-hmm. Time. Here I'm dreaming about writing something about two second ones, but now I will only talk about the first one. In contrast to money, matter is not an abstraction. Otherwise, this would not be matter, but an idea. This is the sense of what Bataille calls senile idealism, to think matter as an idea. Matter is an ultimate commodity, is a concrete piece of substance to which money clings in order to prove that it is real, that the money is real. Such a piece of substance historically stands for the whole material world exchanged for money. It is a material side of the general equivalent, or the thing of economy. Thing, das Ding, as Germans would say. Again, in the old times, the general equivalent was represented by gold. Now such a commodity is not officially but conventionally oil. Or maybe not oil, maybe it's just, this topic is totally random, but simply because I'm Russian, I brought it, it comes from somewhere from my heart, you know, from my blood, which is supposed to be black or something like this. Oil is the lifeblood throbbing through the arteries of war, says Hitler in Yulian Semyonov's famous novel 17 Moments of Spring. Today, especially with the war crisis in the Middle East, this sounds even more evident. Thus, in Reza Nagaristani's book Cyclonopedia, it is oil that allows grasping war as a machine, or rather two machines. On the one side, there is an Abrahamic monotheism or jihad war. On the other, techno-capitalist war, or the war on terror. I quote Nagaristani, to grasp war as a machine, or in other words, to inquire into the Abrahamic war machine in its relation to the techno-capitalist war machine, we must first realize which components allow techno-capitalism and Abrahamic monotheism to reciprocate at all, even on a synergistically hostile level. The answer is oil. War on terror cannot be radically and technically grasped as a machine without consideration of the oil that greases its parts and recomposes its flaws. Such consideration must begin with the twilight of hydrocarbon and the very dawn of the earth. End of quote. Nagaristani presents a set of ideas of the nature and the origination of oil, or its hyperstitional entities, that is related to the narrative. Among other representations, he touches upon a popular comparison between oil and blood and relates it to the, I quote, myth of fossil fuels, according to which hydrocarbons constitute hydrocarbons. Do I pronounce it correctly? Yes. Constitute the origin of petroleum. End of quote. Both oil and blood contain porphyrin, an organic compound that serves as an, as he says, evidence of a common lineage, the hydrocarbon, and in the eyes of the advocates of the myth of fossil fuels, proves that oil as a blood of earth is not just a metaphor. A political economic explications of the theory of fossil fuels are that the sources of oil are finite. And in the petroleum wars, blood is the price of oil. To put it very simply, the fossil fuels theory, categorized by Nagaristani as a myth, suggests that oil was produced from organic matter, from decomposition of various living organisms, from bacteria to dinosaurs. As Nagaristani notes very briefly apropos this theory, the idea that petroleum was formed as a Tellurian entity under unimaginable pressure and heat in the absence of oxygen and between the strata in absolute isolation comprises a typical Freudian Oedipal case. Nagaristani is clearly not very interested in repression or pression. So under this enormous pressure, oil emerges. Nagaristani is clearly not very interested in this case because, as emphasized by Melanie Doherty, he aims in a rather post-Deleuzian way to outline a theory of the non-Oedipal, inorganic, unconscious, that underlines a planetary economy and world military politics. Nagaristani's oil is a part of a sort of diabolic cosmic conspiracy, which brings together all existing narratives. But the very link between the oil and the unconscious is what I find really important and funny and interesting. My first associations with oil are definitely organic. When I was little, my family lived in Surgut, one of the centers of oil industry in the northwest of Siberia. As a schoolgirl, I was very well familiar with the dinosaurs myth. It was my mother who told me that the oil was made of their bodies that were decomposing beneath the ground and the layers of permafrost for thousands and thousands years. On my way to school, there was a shallow swamp. Each time when I was crossing it, I had the feeling that the ground is in fact never really solid. Not only here, but everywhere. Also there where we think it is solid. It just covers this tenacious black liquid of the subterranean cemetery of enormous animals that inhabited the earth long before us. I guess I even believed that the scary dinosaurs could emerge from a swamp created by an oil spill, similarly to a Loch Ness monster protruding from the water of the lake. Somehow oil kept something from that organic life, the death of which was its origin. The oil of my childhood was organic, that is, neither living nor dead, but a living dead or undead, or an uncanny and utterly inhuman afterlife of ancestral animals. Was it there similarly to the sun before us, as a proponent of a philosophical realism, or a schoolgirl like me in 1986, right after the collapse of the Soviet Union, would suggest? Or should we admit in a Batayan manner that this proposition is meaningless, not because this substance must be observed, but because just like the sun, it burns. It burns. The black corpse of the sun is one of the names given to oil in Nagaristani's book, and a very good one, I think. It makes me think about the color of the oil. I saw it spilled around. Nothing can be compared to the blackness of it. The oil is ultra black, more black than death, more black than the black labor, more black than Malevich Square, something like this, more black than the slaves from Mother Africa brought to Americas in the era of colonialism. More black than the black market today, where slaves still are an illegal commodity hidden somewhere underground in the basements of the houses. Remember Marx, who in his economic philosophic manuscripts of 1844 does not really make a big difference between a worker and a slave. The point is that exploitation transforms a living labor into a dead capital. What do a slave, a worker, and oil have in common? That very fact that they are not only the repressed, the unconscious kind of layer of the society in which we exchange matter, labor, and time for money, but that they are exploited or the oppressed. Because, well, you know, the exploitation of natural resources, the exploitation of oil. The worker is exploited as a labor force, the slave is exploited as a black labor force, and the oil is exploited as a natural resource. if we want to grasp oil as Hegel would say, not only as substance, but also as subject, not only substance, but also as subject, then we not only as the thing from the great outdoors, but as the real that is already right here, as Alenka Zupancic put it, we must admit that the oil that now stands behind money for the whole material universe is not a master of this big conspiracy, you know, but a kind of ultimately inhuman black slave that literally occupies the lowest and the biggest strata of the pyramid of exploitation and creates the very core of our capitalist unconscious. So in search for a subject of a cosmic revolution, one should go preach to the oil. That's more or less it. Or maybe I will just draw, if there is a little space there, the pyramid of exploitation. That's how it can be called. The pyramid of exploitation as, I don't remember my initial idea, but it has two levels. This is the ground, the soil. And this is the layer beneath the ground, and this is above the ground. So here we have the oppressors and the oppressed, the contradiction, right? How would it be in Marx, the bourgeoisie and the proletariat, or now, what do we have now? Well, anyway, this is the contradiction between labor and capital. It's still the same. Let's say, bourgeoisie in this old-fashioned, old-school manner, and the proletariat. And here we still have beneath the ground. So there, above that level, the basements of the houses, and more beneath we have like what is really there under the in between the layers of permafrost. So here we have slaves, illegal migrants, prostitutes, kids are being exploited without being, those who are working without being paid, or very little paid, slaves. Here we have still the army of animals. And here we have what? Oil. So this is the whole base of the pyramid of exploitation. But this is, I don't know how, but just as an idea, this is a period. So that's it, more or less. Now I will really enjoy if you ask me some nice questions, not really a harsh critique. I'm not sure I can really confront it because I'm not that, now I'm not that, I don't feel that confident in this kind of material. I'm just a beginner. So I would rather happy to get some suggestions, comments, and so on. Or do we have Q&A where I'm...
You mentioned the sort of parallel natural materialisms of blood and oil, which seems to me, if I'm understanding it correctly, a sort of biopolitical apparatus that's instantiating its own phenomenological experiences of reality. If this is the case, what do you see as a kind of mode of resistance or political resistance to that sort of reality?
Nice reformulation of the topic I concerned in terms of biopolitical regime. I answer briefly. I think that we should reappropriate blood. Blood is also quite an interesting, not even blood, but you know that fascists, the far right, they like this Blut and Boden argument. But it is time to ask ourselves, why should we give up these things that are in itself neither good nor bad, instead of reappropriating them from the enemy? So that, and as any blood, and the oil is something in between, you know, it's in between the blood and the soil. We should think it in these terms of the subject of the how do you call it, resistance or revolt or whatever, not just as a resource or something like this. That's it.
Yeah, I have a question here. It's about what you said about fantasy, and I think you kind of relate to the circle that you drew. And you suggested that kind of the realm of fantasy or something is kind of a tool or something where you can surpass the correlationalism that is kind of defined by the, you know, the Miasor, like so. But how is that, you know, what you suggest as a kind of fantasy differs from the speculative in the speculative realism that all these people are kind of working within? It's called speculative realism. So is there a difference because you suggest as, you know, the realm of fantasy, or what is the established suggestion that is a speculation? Since you suggested that it would be something, I don't know, something different. Or
if I got it correctly, this is one of the most difficult questions. Well, all questions are difficult, but this is just one of them. I mean, how the real of speculative realism differs from the fantasy of psychoanalysis or something like this. I think that well, the most maybe general definition would be in an attempt to think sorry, I think I just had something to, but I lost the argument in my well, a second. Fantasy. So the key word is that the without is within, the outside is inside. So just an attempt to rethink this relation dialectically means that these are not. So this is not the world without the real of. The real is not the world regardless a human being, but precisely the core, its unrecognized core or inner truth. That alienation is an effect. Is an effect of a certain machine of relation, economical and ecological relation, where we are in this machine now, and we have this idea that the reality over there is somehow totally alienated from us, but it's here. I don't know how to expand it further. So do I repeat the same thing, or do you need some deeper analysis? But probably what speculative realists, I don't know that much the details, but probably what they mean by this ancestral real, in fact, does not differ that much from what Lacan, for example, will call real, which corresponds more to the psychic life, which is itself like a certain real, as opposed to what we call reality as we know it. Does this make okay?
Thanks for that. It was really interesting when you brought up the uncanny, and I'm curious about the uncanny in relation to these other figures of property, and especially with blood. Also because the uncanny doesn't it describe this this kind of floating identification or excesses of identification and lacks of identification, where you have an excess, you find your doppelganger and the horror of seeing yourself everywhere, and then the horror of also not recognizing your home and realizing that your home is just like any other. There's nothing special about you, right?
Yeah.
In relation to blood, how does and property also, divestiture of property, how do you see the uncanny working with these signs of absolute rootedness?
A beautiful question. I'm not sure if I can get a beautiful enough answer at that precise moment. But for example, another example, a personal argument, when I saw blood, for example, I immediately lose consciousness. Because I'm not scared, even if it comes from my own body. And this is the perfect, one of the most perfect examples of what I was talking about in relation to the uncanny. So the blood is what constitutes the very substance of our life, and this is not precisely we. All things like this, blood, or now they would say brain, like philosophers are so much interested in brain as they were in the times of Descartes, for example, in this pineal gland, or something like this. Why? Because they are searching they are still searching where is soul. Where is soul? It's in the brain, of course, now. Yes, and then we are turning from philosophy to the brain science, or the cognitive science, or something like this. And so blood is one of such biosubstances, which is the essence of life, the substance of life, which at the same time is kind of like alien, which invades our body, and our very life is precisely this invasion by the other. It's something like this, right?
Thank you so much, too. It was really such a beautiful talk. Well, maybe because you referred to a Kercher, one of the most beautiful metaphors of Bataille there is that oil, coal, other fossil fuels are basically sunlight trapped inside the planet. Yeah, and of course, when you speak about exploitation of oil, what do with it? We burn it. It's combustion engines, and in the moment of being burned, it actually becomes light. So maybe it's not exactly exploitation of oil, but paradoxically it's a liberation of sunlight back to its original form.
Oh.
I mean, you know how they always talk about humans domesticating dogs, but then there is another theory that it's actually much more complex. That dogs actually kind of trained us to feed them. Yeah, so sometimes we're used to the language of exploitation, certain kind of abuses and stuff like that, but perhaps it's interesting to think that it's more complex. Yeah, it could be more complex, I don't know.
Sure. I would be so radical. It's just a little bit in this suggestion. I see a little bit of a tendency towards conspiracy theory, because then the oil represents as an old master. It's more like this, or the burnt sun. As the sun sometimes is represented as a master, of course, as a god also. In religious, it's our old god, whereas oil is rather like the Satan or something like this, the demon, the demonic. But I am trying to take it to the our side of the barricade, to show that not only it's a worker, it's a proletarian. It doesn't hold the power, but probably it will, and then we will see what happens. So, but these are maybe the details of the same scenario for the future. We should think about that. It makes sense.
Thank you so much for that lovely talk. And I'm really impressed when you said that you're somewhat new to materialism, at least in the Marxist sense, because you seem really well-versed with a lot of the major figures that I think a lot of us who are interested in such a subject deal with. And I'm a bit new to it myself, so bear with me as I attempt to ask you a question. But I'm curious about what about specifically this sort of historical moment that necessitates such a reading of oil through a materialist sense, particularly because, I mean, oil has, been around, especially through like the past, 20 years and isn't necessarily going anywhere. And what about like this approach now seems to be sort of useful in your eyes? Because I completely agree, because I think like a lot of our technocratic dreams of dematerialization, have come crashing down, particularly in recent years. And I'd like to just know about more why this approach and why now.
I show a wider but a more narrow approach, also like a historical reality, but more narrow, again from this personal kind of argument. How I admit how this topic came to my mind at all. I was living in Berlin, and then I went back to, at some point I went back to Russia, and it was the fall of 2014 when we started the war in Ukraine. At that autumn, there was the beginning of a crisis, of economic crisis, and the prices of oil suddenly start to, Americans here, they invented other type of extractive activity, so that our prices on oil started to become smaller and smaller, and Russia and Russian ruble started to get down, and down. And we immediately could feel the effect of that. So that was a precise historical context of appearance of this topic that surprisingly made my personal account a little bit bigger, because I had euros, not rubles. I just exchanged and they become bigger. But at that time, what was going on in Russia is all the narratives that existed in media, they were full of speculations about the relation between oil and ruble, and they were considered both as a kind of like agencies. They were saying, oh, how ruble will behave today, what does dollars, how does dollar feels. They were described like every day. The course of ruble was totally different, and they were discussing the place between the currencies as something which happens between like kind of Olympic gods. So the structure of the media perception of oil and money relationship was clearly religious. And as far as we have religion, we, as philosophers, we, through the way of kind of political theology, we come to the ontological questions. So which are now the questions of matter and materialism again. So that's one of the stupid ways how I personally came to this topic. But did I answer your question? Mm-hmm.
I was listening to interviews of some of the water protectors from the Dakota pipeline.
Sorry?
I was listening to some interviews of some of the water protectors from the Dakota pipeline, and one person said a really beautiful thing about how the burning of oil and fossil fuels was a kind of burning up of the past, like this idea of almost erasing the past. And so I guess I'm curious how does that sort of fall easily into this kind of ancestral thing, or how do you think about this like quick, like kind of erasure of maybe finite matter, you know?
It's burning the past. It's also a nice metaphor which could be used. I guess it's more or less the same. What we call unconscious, for example, or the repressed, is the past or forgotten, which in this case returns in the shape of fire, for example, or whatever. What do we have? Not fire, but as Anton says, light, or I would say warmth, yeah, or something, energy. Energy. The same kind of energies, libidinal energy, desire, for example, or this energy which comes from burning petroleum. So we repress, the repressed returns, and by burning it, we move further. Something like this. No? Is it okay? You wanna? No, it's all right. Oh yeah. I guess we have one here or. Oh no. Okay. What? Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you, Oxana.